The apartment was soaked in a late evening stillness that felt older than the walls themselves. The rain outside had been falling for hours, steadily deepening the shadows in the corners of the room. The dim lamplight flickered, as though hesitant to intrude upon the fragile world within. The air was thick with unsaid things. It was not an ordinary silence. This one carried the weight of months, perhaps years. Ella stood by the window, fingers tracing the condensation on the glass, her reflection blurred and ghost-like. The city, lights shimmered beyond, softened by rain into streaks of liquid color. She had always loved nights like these, nights that felt like they belonged to poets and dreamers. But tonight, even the beauty of the storm could not soothe the ache that lived inside her. Behind her, Mark sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, head bowed as if in prayer or surrender. His shoulders rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. He had rehearsed this moment so many times in his mind, but now that she stood there, silent, distant, real, every practiced word deserted him. For a long time, they said nothing. The rain spoke for them. Ella finally broke the silence. "Everything feels like it's collapsing inward," she said quietly. "Like the walls of this place can no longer hold us." Mark lifted his gaze. "It's not the walls," he answered, voice low. "It's us. It's everything we were afraid to face." Ella didn't turn. She watched the distorted reflection of her own eyes, searching for traces of the girl she once was. The girl who believed love could heal anything. The girl who had laughed under willow branches by the river, sunlight in her hair, wind warm on her skin. That version of herself felt so distant now. She wondered if the memory belonged to someone else. They thought flickered, an old memory of their first meeting that it had been early spring. The world smelled of thawing soil and blooming optimism. Ella had gone to the riverside alone, intending to sketch the old stone bridge for her portfolio. She remembered kneeling in the grass, adjusting her pencils, when a clumsy shadow fell over her paper. She looked up to find Mark, apologetic, charming in his awkwardness, holding a bicycle he had clearly lost control of. "I didn't hit you, did I?" he had asked breathlessly. "Only my drawing," she replied with a smile, glancing down at the smudged lines. Mark had insisted on buying her lunch as repayment, and somehow that lunch became a conversation, and the conversation became a 7-hour walk along the riverbanks. They talked about everything: dreams, favorite books, childhood confusions, the strange loneliness of being young. It had felt like the beginning of something vast, something inevitable. They met again the next day, and the next, and the next. Some loves arrive quietly, like a soft tide. Theirs had arrived like a river swollen with spring rain, sweeping them into its current. In the present, Mark rose slowly from the couch. "Ella," he whispered, "I don't know how to reach you anymore." She closed her eyes for a moment. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "You stopped reaching long before I stepped away." Mark flinched, but he didn't deny it. He crossed the room and stood a few feet behind her, close enough to feel the ghost of her warmth, but too far to touch. "I thought silence would protect us," he said. "I thought if I didn't spill the darkness inside me, it wouldn't swallow you too." Ella let out a shaky breath. That was the moment it began swallowing me. She could hear him swallow, hear the breath he didn't know how to exhale. "You went to the river today?" she added softly. Mark hesitated. "Yes." "Why?" "Because," he said slowly, "I needed to remember who I was before I failed us." A fragile quiet fell again. Ella turned at last, fully facing him. Her eyes were luminous with sorrow, but there was a fierce clarity in them too. She walked to the small table near the door and picked up a folded letter, edges worn. She handed it to him. Mark stared at the letter as though holding a piece of himself he had hoped to lose forever. "I wasn't meant to see this, was I?" she asked gently. Mark shook his head. His throat tightened painfully. "I wrote it the night everything changed," he said. "The night we lost." His voice cracked. He cleared it. "I didn't know how to breathe with you. I didn't know how to be strong. So I wrote to you instead. And then I hid it." Ella nodded. "You hid a lot." Mark winced. "Not because I didn't trust you. Because I didn't trust myself." Ella's voice softened. "Then why couldn't you just tell me that?" Mark struggled. "Because I was drowning. And I didn't want my drowning to drag you under too." "You dragged me under by leaving me alone in the water," she whispered. The rain hammered harder against the windows, wind howling like a memory of distant storms. Ella moved away from him, pacing the room slowly. Her steps were measured, her breath steady but fragile. "Mark, when we lost the baby, everything inside me shattered. But I thought we would pick up the pieces together. I thought grief would bind us, not break us." Mark closed his eyes, brows furrowing. "I couldn't face it. I couldn't look at you without seeing what I failed to protect." Ella stopped walking. "You didn't fail me," she said quietly. "You failed yourself. And then you punished us both for it." Mark opened his eyes. They glistened painfully. "I wanted to spare you from the weight of my guilt." Ella shook her head. "But I needed to share the weight. You locked me out of your pain, and I was left to drown in mine." Her words pierced him. He stepped forward, but she retreated slightly. Not far, just enough to remind him of the distance he had built. He stared at the floor. "I went to the river," he said again, "because I wanted to remember the last version of myself that believed I deserved you." Ella's eyes filled with tears. "Love was never about deserving," she whispered. "It was about choosing each other every day. And somewhere along the way, you stopped choosing." Mark was silent. A long, trembling silence. Ella continued, almost reluctantly. "Do you remember the winter after we moved in together? When my mother fell ill? When I was barely sleeping and working 2 shifts to pay her bills?" Her voice grew stronger. "You held me. You cooked for me. You stayed awake just to watch me breathe. You were my anchor." "I remember," Mark said, voice cracking. "I wanted to be your strength." "You were," she said, "but I was ready to be yours too. And you never let me." The weight of that truth broke something open in him. Tears spilled onto his cheeks. He didn't wipe them. Ella turned away again, walking toward the bookshelf. She touched the spines of the books they'd collected together. Novels they had both annotated, travel guides to countries they had dreamed of visiting. Her fingers paused over a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside lay a bundle of dried river grass, tied with pale ribbon, the same grass Mark had woven into a delicate ring on the day he proposed to her. A simple, imperfect symbol of their beginning. Ella lifted it gently. "Do you remember?" she asked. Mark nodded slowly. Everything felt possible. Her voice grew distant, dreamy. "We were barefoot on the shore. The sunset painted the sky in colors I'd never seen before. You took my hands and said the world always changes, but the river never forgets where it flows." He closed his eyes, remembering the warmth of that evening, the hope, the certainty. Ella placed the dried grass back in the box. "The river remembers," she murmured. "But we forgot." Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the lid. Mark finally approached her, stopping just behind her. "Ella, don't go. Not yet. Not like this." He hesitated. "Let me speak the things I should have said years ago." She didn't answer, so he continued. "I was terrified of failing you. When we lost the baby, I thought it proved my greatest fear, that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't protect you. I didn't know how to grieve without breaking. So I hid everything. I hid from you. I hid from myself. And I thought keeping quiet would make the pain smaller." He swallowed, voice fraying. "But silence is a lonely place. And I locked you inside it with me." Ella slowly turned to face him. Tears glistened on her lashes. "All I ever wanted was to share the sorrow. To be your equal in pain as much as in joy." Mark's voice cracked. "I know. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry in ways I can't undo." Ella's breath trembled. "Then why do I still feel like we're standing on opposite sides of the river?" "Because we are," he whispered. "But maybe we don't have to be." She stepped back. "Mark, I think we crossed the point where building a bridge is enough. The distance became part of us." He reached out instinctively, but she subtly stepped out of reach that a quiet understanding passed between them. Ella walked to the coat rack. She lifted her coat. Her movements were soft, deliberate, like she was touching silk made of memories. Mark's chest tightened. "Ella, please, tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this." She paused. Her voice was gentle but firm. "You can't fix what broke because of silence. You can only learn from it." He shook his head helplessly. "Then stay. Stay long enough for me to learn." "I've stayed through every storm," she whispered. "And I lost pieces of myself each time. I need to find them now. Alone." Mark's eyes filled again, panic flickering through them. "So this is it." Ella's sadness deepened but softened too. "No," she said. "This is not an ending. It's a separation of paths. Sometimes love survives by changing shape." He didn't understand. Not fully, but he felt the truth in her words. Ella opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and distant echoes of the river. She looked at him one last time. eyes full of tenderness, regret, gratitude, sorrow, and something like forgiveness. "You were the love of my life," she said softly. "But we lost each other trying to save each other." Then she stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her. The sound was soft, but inside Mark it reverberated like thunder. He sank slowly to the floor. His hands shook as he lifted the dried river grass from its box. It felt fragile, like time itself. A symbol of love that had been real, achingly real, but not enough to withstand the silence that grew between them. He placed the grass on the gramophone and lowered the needle. The melody rose, tender, trembling, full of longing. A song without hope, but not without beauty. Mark pressed his forehead to his knees and cried the way he should have cried years ago, openly, helplessly, honestly. Rain continued to fall outside, but gradually it softened, becoming a gentle whisper rather than a storm. Ella walked through the quiet streets, the cool air brushing against her tear-stained cheeks. She didn't hurry. She let the rain wash away the last remnants of everything she had tried so hard to hold together. She found herself drawn to the river. Its surface glimmered under the streetlights, moving steadily, endlessly, just as it always had. The willow tree, older now, but still standing tall, swayed gently in the wind. Ella approached it slowly. She touched its bark, feeling the familiar ridges beneath her fingertips. Memories surrounded her like warm breath. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she imagined Mark beside her, laughing, promising, dreaming. But when she opened her eyes again, she was alone. The river flowed calmly, carrying fragments of leaves and reflections of distant lights. It did not rush. It did not falter. It moved forward. Ella wiped her cheeks, inhaled deeply, and whispered to the river, "Thank you." She wasn't sure what she was thanking it for. Perhaps for holding her memories. Perhaps for teaching her how to let go. She turned away and began walking along the path. Her footsteps were soft but steady. Her heart ached, but it beat with new purpose. There was healing ahead, slow, imperfect, but real. Behind her, the river kept flowing, and somewhere far away, in a dim apartment filled with the fading notes of a love song, Mark lifted his head at last. His breath was shaky, but something inside him shifted, an opening, a beginning of the long road toward forgiveness, even if he had to walk it alone. Love had ended, yes. But the story of their hearts had not. It simply changed direction, like a river, forever finding new ways to move forward.